to introduce yourself.
My name is Tobin Hart. I'm a psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of West Georgia outside of Atlanta in the United States.
I would like to ask a question about your professional experiences. What do you do in your professional life?
I'm trained as a clinician, a therapist originally, but most of my work is teaching these days, and I'm particularly interested in where spirituality and psychology and also education come together.
My next question will be about education, if you have mentioned it above. What new methodology or what new ways of teaching or of education you see can be involved in the future to improve our system of education?
Well, education is in pretty desperate shape everywhere. It doesn't matter where you look. There certainly are some wonderful teachers and some wonderful schools and programs, but it is in rough shape. And part of the reason it's in rough shape is because we're using a paradigm or a model that's at least 200 years old and probably more, like 400 years old. It's not adequate for the early part of the 20th century. It certainly isn't for the 21st. So part of the edge is trying to recalibrate the relationship between knower, that is the student, knowledge, that is the information that's so available to us today. We just can pull something out of our pocket and there's that thing we can click and find all information. So the old model of having to go to school in order to get that information is no longer relevant. And then the third part is knowing. Knower, knowing, knowledge, and knowing. And it's a recalibration of these three, I think, that's the front edge of education. And the particular kind of knowing that we've been doing for 400 years is what we might call categorical. We put things in categories, we break them apart. And we've done that for so long, and we've done it so well, that it's become an exclusive paradigm, an exclusive way of seeing the world. And so the front edge, I think, has something to do with knowing through contact. We might call it knowledge by presence. We might call it a more intimate empiricism, a pedagogy of resonance in some way, where we really come into contact with the thing. We know this is important already for science, for example, or other technology. When you go into the field or when you get hands-on with something, instantly you've made contact with it and you learn it better. But it's true for everything. And unfortunately, because of our model, our paradigm, we're stuck. We don't have a way out. And we won't find one until we recalibrate these three, I think.
Very interesting, thank you. And can I ask you what special or what distinguishes your method of teaching or your ways of working from other ways of teaching? What is special in your methods?
I don't know that it's special or so different from anyone else. I think the shift that we're looking for is not so much a lever applied to a weight that is a kind of device or even a technique so much, although all sorts of techniques are valuable. Krishnamurti said enlightenment is an accident, but some activities make us accident prone. And so we want to look at those things that do help a little bit. So I'm really interested in ways of knowing that children have innately. For example, I've written a book on the secret spiritual world of children, that they already have these openings and capacities. What do we do in order to nurture that? And what do we do to shut those down? I'm interested in where spirituality and psychology come together. Spirituality is about losing the self. Psychology is about defining the self. And in many ways, we have to do both of these things. We have a body, we have a psyche, so we really need to ground ourselves in some way. And we discover that when we go too far into the other realm, for example, without a grounding, pathology results. On the other hand, psychology has really institutionalized the underestimation of human potential. It really has kept a low ceiling on who we are. And so the advent of all sorts of mystical practices, all sorts of ways of knowing and being that bring more presence to us, that's the hinge, I think, around which we're going to turn and move into a more integrated knowing. And that integration is particularly what I'm interested in, psycho-spiritual development, whether it's in children, emerging adults, or in any of us at any time.
Thank you. What recommendations or what kind of advice or what kind of tool you can describe which, for example, our days teachers can use in their methodology to make the process of education more implementable one or more interesting one for children, for teenagers, at your point of view?
There certainly are a variety of ways in. One project I'm working on in the States is called Contemplation in Education. So it's bringing certain capacities of presence or mindfulness or relationality to the material and to one another and to oneself into the classroom. So as soon as teachers really have a sense of their own presence, what's going on in their body, what's going on in the energy of the room, can I tune into this student right now? Suddenly they model a kind of knowing that hasn't been modeled very well in the classroom. If it has been, it hasn't been intentional, at least in the part of curriculum. So contemplation is one big way. One of the things we're learning neurophysiologically is that the body knows a lot more than we thought it did. We thought that we were just a head riding around on a body. Now we know that the gut thinks. Neuropeptides in the receptor sites are found in the gut and in other places in the body, the heart. And often the body is a first responder. The body knows something even before the mind has time to make sense of it. And so again, whether it be contemplative practice or silence or on the part of the teacher, training that to students, or whether it's tuning into the body more. These are a couple ways. There are others too. Imagination is really big and important, and imagination isn't just self-contained fantasy, but it builds a bridge between the known and the unknown. It is a laboratory of the mind. Einstein, for example, all his experiments were simply imagination. And in some traditions, we even go deeper into the mystical imagination, into what David Bohm, the physicist, called the implicate order. We see something under the surface, and we may come to that through our imagination. So there are all sorts of ways, but really it has to do with this, for me at least, it has to do with this quality of presence that a teacher has and the child innately has, but may need to be drawn out so that they don't get seduced by information and sound bites and data downloads.
Thank you very much. And what do you think is the most important thing for our days to improve in our education or in our system? Or what useful recommendations you can tell us or describe could be implemented our days or can in some way change something in a better way?
Yes, unfortunately, changing education is like moving a mountain with a spoon. It's a very intractable kind of thing. It's huge and it's so embedded in the culture. But I would say there are two things, two directions we could go. And mostly the two that we've been going in is changing curriculum and moving towards more standardized curriculum. I noticed that Russia is recently implementing a more standardized curriculum. The States and the UK and some places in Western Europe and probably elsewhere have been doing that for some time as well. The results, no improvement in what students know and a decrease in things like culture, morale, teacher attrition, these kinds of things. So we're not seeing an improvement. Nobody would argue against higher standards in general, but the problem is that it isn't working. And so the two things we've been throwing at education have been higher standards, more standardized standards, and more assessment of those standards. So more testing, this kind of thing. Neither have worked. There are, at best, incremental increases in test scores in the States. For example, in Atlanta, where I live, there was this massive testing scandal where the teachers and the administrators were actually cheating so that their schools would end up with better test scores, so it hasn't worked. So instead of that, the two directions that I think are more important is to think, one, about a vision for education that is adequate to the kind of humanity and the kind of world that we want. We haven't been paying attention to that. The second is a pedagogy that would lean in that direction. And so I've mentioned a couple of those things, a more emphasis on knowing and presence, for example. But we've got to begin to have conversations, I think, right at the beginning about what the vision is that we want to hold. Most of education in the Western world derives from a 2,500-year-old tradition of the Greeks. It's called the liberal arts, and it was meant to be liberating, to liberate our humanitas, our innate potential of human beings. And we've gotten away from that to simply downloading facts measured on multiple choice tests and also some skill sets. So we've got to really rethink the whole package, I think. And we're at a point right now where we may have some openings to do that. We're so desperate, I think.
Thank you very much. And a few words, if it's possible, about this event. What is your opinion, and what is the usefulness of such events at your point of view?
I think one of the hardest things for folks who really feel or recognize that there's something more, there's more than we're told, is to feel as though we're not alone. And so this is a way to find kin, I think, to find like-minded folks, folks to argue with as well, but folks who somehow have a common sense that there's a deeper way of being, and there are ways to move into that. And there's a long and ancient tradition of mystical knowing, and the transpersonal really is about that mystical knowing. It's honoring that in some way. And the variety of things that I've seen here so far are fabulous, ranging from clinical work to individual mystical experience to applications and everything from activism to education. So the challenge is to find ourselves and to find each other. And a conference like this really helps us do that, I think.
Okay. I have got a new question unexpectedly. What do you think about human resources, and on the basis of your practicing in the teaching field, how do you think we can help our children to discover their human potential resources and to realize these resources, to be self-realized person?
Not a short answer to that one, but I do think that for me, what I see is this innate capacity, both psychologically and spiritually. And that if we leave one of those behind, or both of those behind, as we often are doing, we're going to go nowhere very fast. It's very sad. But again, to recognize that children have innate spiritual capacities for wisdom, for wonder, for wondering. They ask big questions. What am I here for? What's this about? They have moments of bliss, of ecstasy. Abraham Heschel says the beginning of wisdom is wonder, and the beginning of wonder is awe. When a child hears a thunderstorm for the first time, or sees an elephant up close, or even eats ice cream, there can be this incredible falling into awe, this incredible opening. And so, so for us to acknowledge that kids already have that, and as parents first, as well as teachers, to really begin to recognize that. And once it's pointed out to adults, they begin to see it. It's quite remarkable to say, oh, you know, I've been with my kid for 10 years, but once I read that or once I heard about that, I began to notice things that I didn't notice before. And the other piece is this psychological development. It has to happen. It's just part of how we're made. And so to develop a sense of self, to develop a sense of the other, so compassion and connection with the other, to develop a sense of resilience and security, to belong to something, to belong to home, to belong to school, to belong to religion, you know, whatever it is. These are just absolutely fundamental capacities that not only affect how we operate in the world, but even how we operate at a neurobiological level. We already know that basic security and safety, basic relational, to have somebody really see you and recognize who you are, absolutely helps the child anchor on the planet and anchor in themselves. And then when they go out in the world, well, first they're more likely to go out because they've got a sense of security, right? And then beyond that, they become curious and have a sense of resilience. So when they trip, they have the capacity already to come back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your coming here, and I hope that implementing innovative and realizing that it's necessary to implement these innovative methods, we can improve something in a better way for us personally and for people around us. Thank you very much.